We're in the series Be Freer, One Step at a Time. And today's step in this change cycle is New Birth Clear, Step 9. At this 9th step of a new doing pattern, it is worth noting that there have been settling in stages of this new doing pattern. Top left-hand image. At an earlier stage, with more steps to go and still not knowing, there was still a sense that at first hazy promise would be fulfilled. Lower left-hand image. At a later stage of this particular change cycle, experience of new birthings of emotional and functional outcomes could be named. Right-hand image. At this rounding off stage of this now not new pattern, there is integration into our life and living in a way that has something of an autopilot way of operating, and the benefits are much more tangible. A personal story of this integrational settling. My pattern that had gone out of balance was to be totally responsible for all of my conscious inner and outer reactions. One consequence was that play was not integrated into my outer life. During these years, my inner sense of humour came out in how I viewed life as joking, laughing, giggling, chuckling with me, and names such as Lucy jokes. A dream wisdom revelation when I was 44 years old was that I hadn't played for 34 years. One new doing pattern was that I now needed to integrate a sense of play into my outer life. At the stage of the top left-hand image, I named my sense of humour as twisted. At the stage of the lower left-hand image, I named my sense of humour as quirky. At this 9th step of changing a doing pattern, people say to me, "Lucy, you are so funny," when I haven't made an effort to be so. The left-hand image here reminds that at an earlier stage, this new doing pattern became somewhat firmly integrated into life and living, in that struggles in life weren't clearly associated with this doing pattern. The right-hand image depicts how, at stage 9, integration of this particular pattern is disassociated from struggle, in that there are now benchmarks, boundaries for what works and doesn't work about this new, now not new, doing pattern integrated into our life and living. Resonance with the play story. Since play meant, for me, not being totally responsible all the time, there was a steep learning curve for me to integrate play into my life and living after 34 years of non-integration of play. The left-hand image represents how, in the early stages of this steep learning curve, I would pause in the midst of doing something responsible and listen to my inner wisdom inviting me to do something playful. The right-hand image represents that now there is a much healthier balance between being responsible and playful, because I now know from trial and error what the boundaries of integration are. That is, I don't have to work so consciously to know when it is appropriate to lay aside my former pattern of being totally responsible all the time. In retrospect for you, I invite you to savour emotional realities that underpin the settling that has happened as you've moved through to stage 9 of this change cycle. Likely emotional underpinning realities at step 9 are worth it, anticipation, integration. Naming these emotional underpinning realities brings to consciousness senses of settling in your emotional and rhythmic systems that could go unnoticed without pausing to name them. Another effect and affect to savour is how the sense of struggle has decreased. In the top left-hand image, notice the hole after this particular sugar beet was harvested. Similarly, there was pullback energy from the whole of the old pattern being left behind and removed from inner rhythmic systems. In the lower left-hand image, a different sugar beet is firmly past the germinating stage, representing that there was a decreasing sense of struggle as the rhythmic tracks of the new doing pattern deepened somewhat. In the right-hand image, the sugar beet in hand represents how now there is a sense of the new doing pattern having been harvested. It's like being in your hand, as now there is none of the former sense of struggle. A way to deepen this in-your-hand experience is to note, at stage 1 I was, now I am. Doing this is a way to honour the harvest of your inner journeying through this new do pattern. Resonance with the play story. At one stage, on the day after my first experience of doing play consciously, with absolutely no sense of responsibility, I was curled up in the fetal position when I replayed the experience in my mind. A note. A massive reaction such as this often happens on the first doing of the opposite of a long-standing pattern of behaviour. All inner rhythmic systems are in shock, and this expresses itself through emotional and physical reactions. Now, at stage 9, I am so happy that my sense of play is so integrated that people say to me, "You are so funny," when I didn't decide consciously to try to be funny or to be funny. Others still experience me as being quite responsible, which I also don't decide consciously or try to be. There's a joy in knowing that inner balance between responsibility and play is now so intrinsic that others witness it and reflect it back to me. I now invite you to invoke your observer self to notice how neural pathways have deepened. Doing this opens the way for you to hear how others have also noticed these same changes. The left-hand image. At first, there was a need for a conscious choice to do the new doing activity as a new neural pathway was laid down and began to strengthen. Middle image. As the neural pathway strengthened and metaphorically deepened, much less conscious effort was needed for the same type of activity. Right-hand image. This neural pathway has strengthened enough to be metaphorically called a rut. At this stage, this particular doing activity is triggered almost automatically, although probably not at the same autopilot stage of the former pattern of activity. Resonance with the play story. At track stage, left-hand image, I had very consciously to stop now and again in the midst of my being totally responsible way of engaging in activities. At this time, Lucy Joke prefaced when I shared a personal play event, and that probably defined how I had no outer benchmark to know how others would receive my play activity. At deepening track stage, middle image, when I was more comfortable with play as authentic personal interactivity, and less anxious about how others would receive my play event, the prefacing phrase to sharing a personal play event was my twisted sense of humour. The use of the word twisted demonstrates that there was still some inner discomfort about engaging in play activity. At settled track stage, right-hand image, when play and responsible inner personal stances are more in balance, the present preface to a play event shared is my quirky sense of humour. The smile on my face and in my heart indicate that I am not only comfortable about my sense of play, but see it as a personal gifting for myself and others. Surely harvest at this 9th step journey of change to integrate a play inner stance with a long-standing, totally responsible inner stance. The left-hand image here also metaphorically represents an autopilot level of a neural pathway. The right-hand image metaphorically represents, as well as what has been named before, a well-seasoned neural pathway, typically present at the 9th step of a cycle of change. In life, most inner invitations to change a pattern of behaviour, attitude or value arise in order to balance a very strong neural pathway that has come to be so deep because of a do pattern of activity that has moved to overdrive status. That is, the reason for invoking it at an autopilot level no longer exists. Patterns that go into this kind of overdrive are usually long-standing and have much trauma attached from the way they have evolved as a way to cope with life for what couldn't be dealt with during the time of arising. The neural pathway for balancing a pattern in overdrive can become almost automatic. However, the autopilot reaction of the original pattern will be triggered up now and again. The association of trauma with the storing in unconscious gives this former neural pathway, rut, much more strength than the present do pattern could ever have. It is worth noting that it is not a disaster when you are triggered. Mostly after a triggering event, it is possible in imagination to put the trigger point on hold. Then, in the imaginative space created, move your inner attention to your new ability to be able to choose. This gives more strength to the new pattern, decreases the power of the old pattern, and brings healing to wounding associated with the former pattern. At stage 8, we could note how many strands of experience had come together, top left-hand image. Now at stage 9, we can note how this now not new doing pattern has become integrated into life and living, the lower left-hand image. Actually, right-hand image. Now it is so integrated into life and living patterns that we aren't consciously aware of it most of the time. This image seems to me to portray someone who is experiencing that settled place without an echo of struggle and or pining. And so we've paused and we've listened and we've accepted. And as we look back, we can notice how we have changed in a positive way. Transformation. And so now, a wise way forward is to make regular noticing spaces in your life and living experiences. This is a very vibrant way for you yourself to nurture your own self-image. At times when the struggle elements of other cycles of change of your life and living patterns are beginning or in process of development and are high in your personal agenda awareness, it can have a balancing effect to rest in how you've changed for the better in this cycle of change. Savouring what has come to birth in this rounding off of a cycle of change is a very potent way to appreciate deeply who you are becoming.